First, I was born in 1929, which makes me be 93 in January. Been here a long time. And I was born in a log cabin. The cabin was, the whole cabin was maybe a little bit bigger than this area right here. A little bit longer, maybe that way. Just a few feet. And that was the main body of the house. And it was logs. And on the back side of it was a shelter. A room was built on out of boards. It wasn't logs, it was boards. And that was the kitchen and the dining room. And in the main body of the house there was 2 beds in the back end of the house, one on that side. Up at the front end of the house, there was a fireplace with 2 windows, one on each side of that fireplace. But back then, we didn't have glass windows in the windows. We had wooden shutters on the windows. No glass in it at all in the main part of the house, or in the kitchen either. The whole house had wooden shutters on it. And the doors, the outside doors, had latches, wooden latches. The old-fashioned kind that you lift the latch up and pull it down in a wood holder on the door, and it'd be latched. So that's the kind of house I was born in. And there was me and my twin sisters and my youngest brothers was all born in that log house. 4 of us was born in that log house. And we lived in that house until I was about 11 or 12 years old, about 11, I think, around 11, I can't remember exactly. And there was a lot of things happened in those about 10 years or more that I lived in that log house. Things were really hard. It was what you call a 1-horse farm. There was about 35, 40 acres of land, and that's all Daddy had to cultivate to make a crop to feed the whole family. And there was one interesting thing about the house. I may jump around some, and that was the flooring in the house. It was not airtight by no means. There was knot holes in the floor big as a 50-cent piece in the floor of the house. And us children on cold days, we would play with the chickens through those knot holes. The chickens would come under the house and walk around. We'd find a knot hole and look through that knot hole till a chicken had come by. We'd tie a grain of corn or some kind of food on a string, and we'd put it down through that knot hole. And then chickens, of course, would come running and grab it. And when they grab it, we'd yank the string back up. Anyway, we had fun doing such as that and all that crazy stuff, but we'd do that.
Where was that house?
The house was, you know where Carolyn's, where Carolyn lived before she moved this last time? No, you hadn't been since she moved, but where she lived, there on the, and where Mama's house was, grandmother's, where grandmother's house was, back of, look out back of grandmother's house, across that field, you can see cars traveling the road now because all the trees have been cut, and it's all farm now and clean. And on that road that travels back of grandmother's old house down there, it was on that road.
Not very far from
Not
where
very
they all
far.
live there now.
Yeah.
Not very far from where grandmother's old house is. But it's been tore down and gone a long, long time ago. And unfortunately, none of us even got a picture of the old house.
Really?
Because we didn't have a cameras. We didn't have a camera. Nobody owned a camera then. In our family anyway, we were too poor. So, we didn't get a picture of it. I wish we could have. And, there was a lot of things happened there. As we grew up, my brother, older than me, was 3 years older than me, and everywhere he went, I thought I had to go too. I was right on his heels, and he used to build flips. If you know what an old flip,
Slingshot.
seen one slingshot? He'd build them, and we'd go bird hunting with them. And he would actually kill a bird every once in a while with one. But I never had the good luck. I didn't ever hit one right to kill it, but he could.
I bet you could outfish him with a cane pole.
What?
I bet outfish him with a cane pole, you could.
Oh, well, I could catch as many fish as he could. But he could outshoot me. But we were always playing. We played all over the woods. There was a pasture in front of our house, and there was cows. The neighbor down the road had cows in that pasture, and occasionally the man that owned the cows would bring his bull and put in there with the cows, and that bull was a mean looking cow, and I don't know where he was or not. He bothered anybody that I know of, but he was a red cow. His hair was red. I can see him just as good today. And he had a white face. And you know, bulls he had a big old broad face, white face, and had horns. He had horns about that long. And my dad had always told me and Roscoe loved to play over there in that pasture. There was a stream of water in the pasture, and we'd like to go down there and wade and catch crawfish and minnows and just while the days away. That's what we spent our days growing up doing. And so my dad told us, he says, now y'all better be careful playing over there in that pasture. Says, if that bull is in there, says he might be mean, and if he gets after you, he can outrun you, and you better be sure you don't let him catch you. You better get out of there and get back over the fence and in the yard before he could get you. Well, one day Roscoe and I, my brother, were we were playing over there in the pasture, and we just, Jason, you remember this story. I used to tell it to you and Marcia for a bedtime story when we lived down at the lake. And anyway, we were over there playing one day, and we messed around and didn't notice, and the cows had wandered grazing up pretty close to where we were. Well, we looked up and saw them cows, and there was that red-faced bull right with them. Scared us to death. We were scared we didn't have time to run for the fence and get over the fence and get to safety if they just took out after us or he had them. So there was oak trees, small oak trees all over that pasture. So we found us an oak tree. Roscoe, my brother, says, well, should we try to run and make it to the fence, or should we climb a tree and just wait till the cows go on the way? So we decided our best bet would be just climb up one of them trees and get up there and sit still and be quiet and wait till the cows moved on the way. And that's what we done. We climbed up that oak tree, two little old kids, and sat up there for a very good while. But the cows, they never did notice us. They grazed on the way. And when they got far enough away, we thought we could make it to that fence and get to that in the yard at the house. We climbed down the tree, and I mean, we took off. So, needless to say, we didn't go back in the pasture right away when that bull was anywhere around. But anyway, that was one thing that happened. And there was one day, my dad was winding peanuts. I don't know if any of y'all are old enough to know what that is, but peanuts that he was going to plant for seed peanuts, he was getting the trash out of them, holding them up and pouring them in a cotton sheet on the ground and letting the wind blow the trash out of them.
Were they in the holes still?
No, they were shelled.
Shelled.
They were already, we had shelled them, but they still had.
So you have to let them dry out.
And he didn't want that trash had clogged up the old planters. The planters they had then, they were easy to clog up if there was trash in them, and he wanted them clean. Anyway, he was out in the mule lot where the mules were at the barn. There was a fenced-in area where we called that the mule lot. And doing that, and we had a dog at that time. And the dog was out, our dog was out there in the yard. And there was a dog come walking up the road. And we was hoping, Daddy said he was hoping that dog would go on by, wouldn't turn in at our house. But he turned in at our house. And of course our dog engaged him because he was on his territory. And the dog was mad. Daddy felt sure he was mad because he was slobbering. He said that dog that come walking up the road and jumped on our dog and got in a fight with him and bit him, was mad.
When you say mad, what do you mean by mad?
A mad dog.
Had rabies.
Rabies.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so after the dogs separated from the fighting, that mad dog went on down the road and left. But when Daddy saw the dog coming, he hollered for Mama to get the young'uns in the house and shut the door. and she got all of us in the house. We were out in the yard playing, I guess. But she called us and got us in the house, and we cracked the door a little bit and looked out and saw the dogs fighting. And saw that mad dog. So the dog went on up the road, and a couple of miles up the road, somebody shot him and killed him. They saw him, and they thought he was mad too because he was slobbering. So when they shot him and killed him, they had no way of knowing for sure if he had rabies or mad, except to cut his head off and send that to Atlanta. Back then, they did down there in that area, they didn't have no way of testing them to see if they had it or not. Atlanta was the nearest place. So they sent that dog's head to Atlanta, and it come back. He was mad. The dog was. So Daddy knew that he couldn't keep our dog, that he'd have to have him killed because he might go mad too and might bite one of us children. So he got his nephew, one of Mama's sister's brothers, to take his gun and take him down in the woods and shoot him and bury him. So we had that experience with a mad dog.
These are rough stories, Mama. You need to lighten it up.
She
I don't
moved
know.
away from the bull.
I don't remember.
bull never did get her.
No, they got away from the bull, but you need to lighten these stories
I
up.
remember
It's reality.
It is reality. It's
sorry.
rough. It was a rough life. I mean, there's a lot going on.
Those kind of stories is what stuck in your mind the
I
most.
know, that's true.
Especially
The
when you were a young
traumatic
kid.
things stick
When
with
you were a young
a
kid.
long time.
You remembered that. But I remember too when everybody growed cane down there that you made syrup out of. Everybody had a cane patch, and they made their own syrup and cooked it, and we didn't ever have to buy syrup. Daddy'd make enough syrup to do us a whole year. But the cane had to get to a certain point before we were allowed to go into the cane patch and get in it and chew it. We like to get a stalk and peel it, and cut it up with a knife and chew it and get the juice out of it.
Anybody doesn't know what sugar cane looks
it's
like,
real
it looks
sweet.
like
I
bamboo.
know.
It looks a lot like bamboo, but it's.
I know Libby and these younger ones probably don't know what that is. Daddy would tell us not to go to cane patch and not to go in there till he told us we could and bother the cane. Well, we and my brother, we couldn't wait to sneak just one stalk. He would never miss it. We could go in there and cut one stalk out. He would never miss it, see it. But I don't know how in the world he done it. But he would see some sign where we or somebody had been in the cane patch and got a stalk of cane. I don't know if we were careless with our peelings and he saw them and knowed who done it. And
The footprints may have given you away.
Yeah.
we couldn't be careful enough and hide our tracks to keep him from knowing if we went in that cane patch too early.
Why didn't he want you to go in too early?
Well, if he'd have turned us loose to go in there and get some anytime we wanted it, we'd have been down there every day getting it and chewing it, and we'd have tore up that cane patch. And that was gonna be part of our livelihood.
Is that from your saying and tearing up the patch?
I don't know. I guess so, before I don't know if that's it or not. But, yes, that was part of our livelihood. He bought a gallon buckets, little gallon galvanized buckets to put it in, brand new. And he cooked that, grind all that cane up and get the juice out of it and cook that syrup. And you'd have to cook it for hours to get syrup out of that juice. But it was really good. He knew just exactly how to cook it to make that syrup, good syrup. And then one night, it's still it's not too bad, but one night we'd all gone to bed, dark, no electricity, nothing like that.
Still had kerosene lamps
You
and
had
stuff
to
at
light a
that point.
kerosene lamp to get any light in the house. Well, one night we'd gone to bed and Mama had a hen sitting on some eggs in a hen nest out there. The nest was up on the side of the smokehouse, built up on the side of outside of the smokehouse, outside, and the chicken just started to squawking and hollering and carrying on like something was killing her. And Mama said, something's after the setting hen or chicken or something. And Daddy, he jumped up out of the bed and he kept a double-barrel shotgun. That's all we had in the way of a gun. It was an old double-barrel shotgun. And he kept it up on two nails, big old nails, behind the front door, over by his bed where he slept, and it was on his side of the room by his bed. And that chicken was just carrying on just like you'd killing her out there, and he was trying to get the shotgun and get out there to see what it was. And Mama says, y'all young and stay in the bed. It woke everybody up. But we stayed in the bed. We didn't know what it was, and we were scared. And Mama jumped up out of the bed though, and she was gonna go with Daddy to see what it was. And on the way out to see what was wrong with the chicken, they couldn't see. It was dark in the house, and she run into the barrel of that shotgun, hit her head right there, and there was a print of that barrel of that shotgun, just like that, on her head.
How disastrous that could have been.
I know,
Scary.
it could have been terrible. He didn't have his finger on the trigger, I don't think.
No.
But they both got out there though, to see what was wrong with the chickens. And the possum had climbed up to the hen nest that was sitting on the eggs to raise biddies, and throwed the old hen off of the nest down on the ground, and she was flopping around down there just squawking for dear life. The possum, he was leaving. I don't remember now if Daddy even shot at him. But anyway, they got the old hen settled back. He didn't, I think he maybe stirred up the eggs and messed up 2 or 3 eggs. Mama got her nest cleaned out and got her straightened back up on the nest. And went back to bed, got back in the house, and she discovered she'd hit her head on the shotgun barrel.
Yep.
And of course they doctored it with some turpentine kerosene, and that was it.
Turpentine and kerosene.
That's
what
that
you
was
use.
our
Antibiotics.
medicine was turpentine and kerosene. We didn't
You have a
have,
cut, you have a sore muscle, you have a broke leg.
Kerosene.
if we stepped on a rusty nail,
Mosquito bite, whatever.
and we stepped on a lot of them, rusty nails. And we'd get the turpentine kerosene bottle turned up there on that, where that nail went in our foot. Never did bother us. That was it.
No tetanus shot.
No tetanus shot. Nothing. Never went to the doctor for nothing. Only time either any of us went to the doctor that I remember of growing up, Roscoe was, my oldest brother he was a good sized boy anyway. He built a swing, hung a rope and a tire tied on a car tire from a china bear. We had big china bear trees in the yard around that old log house. And he tied rope on that tire, and we would swing in that tire. And he was swinging with Mary, and she was a little bitty thing. She was about maybe 5 years old. And she fell out. He didn't hold her in, and she let go and fell out. And they was roots from the china bear trees, growing up on top of the ground, out of the ground. And her arm, she fell, and her arm must have hit on one of those china bear roots when she fell on the ground. And I don't know, maybe she fell on the arm then some way, but it broke one of her arms. And when they got to her and picked her up, they said they could see that the arm was broke. And they said, we got to take her to the doctor. Said, we can't not take her to the doctor and get her arm fixed. So they took her to the doctor and got her arm set. She wore a cast. I remember that. She was a little bitty thing, just a little girl. And there was all kinds of things. A lot of memories in the old log house. Daddy built when at first it was just me and Winifred, Roscoe, and me. Well, they couldn't put up near another bed in the main body of the house. There just weren't no room to put up another bed. Had to have another bed. We were done sleeping 3 to the bed. And so Daddy put in to build a room on the house. And he built that room on that house by himself, as far as I know. I can't remember him having any help, but I think surely he must have had some neighbors to come in and help him to put up the frame in it a little bit. But he cut down a tree and sawed the blocks the length that he wanted them to be. And he split the shingles with an axe and a wedge to roof that room that he built on to the other end of that log house that we lived in, mostly by ourselves. And then Marion and Carolyn was born. They knew they were going to have a baby, but Mama didn't know she was going to have twins until they were born.
What was it you said, grandmother said about having twins? I can't,
It was me.
was it you?
Yeah. It was when she was getting older and she was getting a little absent-minded, and we were all sitting down at her house. We'd eaten, and the women were all sitting around talking.
Yeah.
They started talking about having babies, and grandmother said, "I sure am glad I never did have twins."
I remember that, yeah. Now, Mama, you told me something about
Yeah,
people
that
would
was
ask her about having twins, and she said, what was it she said?
Oh, I don't remember
the
this.
night they were born. She was when one of the babies was born. The doctor, they had a country doctor, a small town doctor. He come out that night to the house. They were born they're in the log house, and the doctor would come to your house then. There weren't no hospitals nowhere around for you to go to have one, so you stayed at home, and the doctor, he had a car. He's the only one in the country had a car, and he'd come out to your house and deliver your babies. So, this Mama said, she talked about it, she said that when one of the babies was born, said, the doctor says, well, says, you got one, but says, I believe there's another one. She said, oh my goodness.
No, there was some.
Yeah, she lamented about it though, that there was another one. She didn't know what she's gonna do with another one. So she had just expected one. And then he told her there was two. She didn't know what to do.
Mm.
And I can remember that night very well. I was asleep. And there's 3 years difference in mine and Mary and Carolyn's ages. And I was asleep. Me and Winifred were sleeping in that back room, shed room that Daddy had built on to the house. And they had put up another bed. And me and Winifred were sleeping back there. Well, the evening before, there was going to be a baby coming in a family, then they would send all the older children to the neighbors or to a relatives to sleep that night. And when the baby was being born, so Winifred and Roscoe had gone up to my aunt and uncle. They lived just up the road, just a little ways from, a little bit further from your house to y'all's barn, where it was apart from where they lived from us. And so they had gone up there the evening before. And they kept me, though, there at the house. They thought I was so little that I would just sleep through it all night, and wouldn't wake up. But something must have woke me up. I don't know what it was. But I woke up and started crying. And my grandmother, Mama's mother, was there for the baby delivery, of course. And she come back there in the room and picked me up in her arms. I can remember it just as good. And she carried me up through there by Mama's bed, taking me up to the fireplace. It was in February. They were born in February. It was pretty cold. And I looked over from my Grandmama carrying me in her arms, and there was two babies laying in the bed, bundled up by Mama. And I thought, I didn't know what to think, because I worked about 3 years. But I just remembered.
Where did the babies come from?
I just remembered seeing them two babies laying in the bed with her. And then Grandma just took me on up to the fireplace where they was the doctor and Daddy and my aunt, Mama's sister, was all there that night. So I remember that very well. Just as plain as anything. And
I remember you telling me one time, Grandmama, that you can remember back in those days that your Christmas presents would be an orange.
yeah. Yeah, I was gonna tell that, but it wouldn't come to me. Christmas was nothing to us, except we knew everybody, it was Christmas, Jesus' birthday, and all that, but we never had a tree, never did have a tree. We had, in the fall of the year, we would get a new pair of shoes. We went barefooted all the summer. We didn't have no shoes. And then in the fall, before it'd get cold and before school would start, we'd get a new pair of shoes. So they'd save all of us as shoe boxes that have new shoes come in till Christmas. And at Christmas, on Christmas Eve night, after all those children had gone to bed, that's when our Santa Claus had come. Of course, we thought it was Santa Claus. But Mom and Daddy we know now who Santa Claus and what it was. Daddy would go to town and he would buy, we had fruit. We'd get an orange and an apple and a banana and a little pot of raisins, dried raisins. You could buy a bunch of big old huge pot of dried
On the
raisins.
stem, like grapes, they,
Yeah, still
like on the stem,
on the
yeah.
stem.
Raisins
Back
already
then,
dried up great. I
and
didn't
they
think
were
to try it
sweet.
again.
We loved raisins. I mean, you know, we loved anything we could get our hands on to eat, because we didn't have gorgy, all we could eat. Never, hardly. But we had enough, we were never hungry. I can say that. I don't remember ever being hungry. But we didn't have the food that we have now. We sure didn't. And Mama would try to, if she could go to town, get a chance to go to town, she would try to buy us, the girls, a little doll. You could buy a little bitty doll, be about 5 or 6 inches. They were little bitty ones, and they were just little baby dolls. And the girls would get a little tiny baby doll like that. It probably didn't cost but a quarter. And the boys would get a little car, a little metal car, something like that in their box, and the fruit.
Hot Wheels.
Huh?
Yeah, before all
Early
the-
version of Hot Wheels.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
a little bit.
No, Hot
Fruit.
Wheels hadn't come out then. They were just little tiny metal cars. They'd be about that long. They'd be
So
just
you got
metal.
your shoebox filled with your fruit and your toy.
In one little toy.
Who would always
And
be the
that's-
first one to eat all the fruit, and who would be the saver that saved it the longest?
Oh, I don't remember that.
You don't
I
remember?
don't remember. We probably couldn't eat it all that night. We'd save some till the next day, all of us probably. We couldn't eat all of that, them many pieces of fruit that morning. But we had to eat up by night, I imagine, during the day.
Yeah, what was school like?
Well, I walked to school till I was in the 3rd grade. In the 1st and 2nd grade, I walked to school with Winifred and Roscoe, my older brother, for 2 years, about 2 miles.
And were y'all all in the
One way.
same school room? Like, were you in, I know you were in different grades, classes, but were y'all all in the same classroom together?
The first through the 7th grade was in 2 rooms. They taught the first through probably the 4th, I don't remember exactly, in one room, and then from the 4th through the 7th in the other room. It was a 2-room schoolhouse. Had a pot-bellied wood stove in it,
Where was
in
it
each
at?
side.
Yeah, where was that?
Wood heater. That's all we had.
Is that the school that Minton school up there at the end of the road?
That was the first school that I went to.
That
but
was,
then-
that school, was that the Minton, M-I-N-T-O-N school?
Yeah, it was called South Minnan. That first 2-room
But
old.
isn't that building that was up there at the end of the road by Causey's store?
Yeah. Yeah, close to Causey's store. It was close to Causey's store.
Is that building still there? The building's still there, but it's not a
No,
school.
it ain't either.
They tore it
They-
down.
they-
There's
they-
a more modern.
Neither one of them there. They built up at the other, now when they consolidated that 2-room schoolhouse, and then we went to what they call North Minnan. That was South Minnan, the 2-room. North Minnan taught through the 7th grade, but they had a teacher for each grade in that school. And it's further on up the road. It's up at Anderson City. You know where Anderson City was.
You couldn't walk that far.
No. That's when we started having school buses. After I was in
What did the school bus look like?
to the 3rd grade, then we started school buses.
What did the school bus look like?
It was yellow, but
It was a yellow
it was
bus?
homemade.
A homemade bus.
It was homemade. It was made out of. It had windows in it with like wood, but it didn't have seats like we got now in the buses. They were benches running straight up and down. One down each side
Oh, okay.
and 2 down the middle. Back to back. One on each side down the middle.
Were they attached to the floor or they just
Yeah.
slide around?
They were attached to the floor.
No seat belts.
No. We were lucky.
Driver
We
didn't have a
were lucky we had a bus. We were so proud when we got a school bus and didn't have to walk to school in the rain, cold, in our shoes. Our shoes, by the end of the winter was getting wore out. And if one of us' shoe got a hole in the bottom of it, you didn't get a new pair. Daddy had a shoe last that he worked on the shoes, our shoes, and fixed them as best he could. He'd put get thick cardboard, and put it in our shoes. And then we wore them shoes right on the rest of that time. We wore them out.
These are life survival skills y'all need to know about.
What, you said you was gonna talk about when the pig got in the toilet.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was when we moved from the log house. I was 11 years old. We moved. Daddy got to where he couldn't hardly make a living. The family was so big on that 35 acres of land. He just it couldn't grow enough, and it wouldn't make enough hardly for us to live off of. So, there was this farm, excuse me, come available up. Some of y'all know where Philip Cosse's store was up the road from where grandmother lived. And going up that dirt road from her house, going around a sharp curve to the right on the left, right in the middle of that sharp curve, was a big old house. It's been gone for many years. I don't think none of my children can remember it being there hardly now. And that farm, somehow the government got a hold of it. I don't know how that happened, but I think the government bought it from somebody that failed to pay for it or something. Anyway, and the government, they just would rent it out or like sharecrop it. I don't know exactly how the money was changed, how he farmed that land there, that farm. For 2 years we lived there. Well, when we moved there, the government, we was buying or renting the land from the government somehow, and they come out, the government did, sent somebody out there and built a sanitary toilet out back of the house.
Important.
Yeah, out back of the house, outside the yard, that dug a hole about 7 feet deep. I imagine it was every bit of it. And it was about four or 5 feet by 5 feet square. Big hole. And then they put a concrete slab over that. But they left a hole in the center of it for the toilet. Then they built a toilet seat. And
This is an outhouse, y'all, not a
yeah,
toilet.
yeah, well, I'm calling it a toilet. We always called them toilets, we didn't say outside.
It's like the toilets when we're in the metro
And,
park.
and they said, put that over that, built that over that hole. It was all built stout and sturdy and good. And it had a lid on it that you raise up and let down. And the top of the lid that you let down to cover the seat up when it weren't in use had a heavy screen wire. This big screen like you see. Not little screen wire, but what you call that?
Chicken wire.
Heavy duty
Hardware cloth.
hardware cloth, I believe, something like that. In the lid on it, big hole like that, and it had that screen wire. And now Daddy told us he had hogs, and he had the hogs in the field around the toilet. And he says, now when y'all young'uns go out to the toilet, he says, you be sure and shut the door and latch it. Every time you go in and out, you shut the door and latch it when you come out. Because when them hogs might get in there. So, of course we knew that was a strict rule. But nobody knows who in the world left that door open one time. But while we were there, somebody went out there and left the door open. And not only did they leave the door open, they left the lid up to the toilet. They didn't let the lid down. And so Roscoe, I believe it was, my brother older than me, he went out there one morning, and he come back to the house and told Daddy, he says there's a pig out there in the toilet, down in the toilet. And Daddy says, what? He said, yeah. Says, I've been out there, and says, I can hear him down in there just a grunting and a grunting, carrying on. And we all jumped up, of course, and we had to go out there and see that. And, yes, sir. There was a pig.
Pig in the pot.
He was just a little shody pig, he was about that long, I reckon, and maybe
A
about.
shoat is a young
about that
pig. Vocabulary word.
A shoat is a young pig.
Young pig,
He's
that's what I
older
said.
than a piglet,
Older
but he
than a
ain't.
piglet.
He still ain't
Not a
grown
pot.
yet.
Not a hog yet.
Pig bacon, yeah.
But anyway, he was just walking around down in there, just grunting. And they thought, Daddy and Roscoe went to figuring, well, how in the world are we gonna get that thing out there? What in the world are we gonna do? So they figured around and worked around there half a day. But they finally figured out, well, they knew, they were told, the men that installed the toilet told Daddy that the top of the toilet, the building part of it, the roof and the sides and all, was separate,
You could move
built
it.
separate from that concrete pad. It was just down on it. And you could flip it over, flip that off of it, and you'd have just the concrete pad sitting there with the toilet seat on it. Well, it was, with that, top over, it was so dark in there, down in there, you couldn't see nothing. So they flipped that toilet off of that seat, and Daddy and Roscoe got a rope. They said, there ain't no way in the world we're gonna get that pig out of there, but to take a rope and fish it around down in there with a loop on the end of it and see if he'll walk in it. If he'll step in it, then we can maybe pick him up, get him out. So they worried and worried and worried. But they did that with that rope, and they finally lassoed that pig out of that toilet. Pulled him up out of there, got him out.
Who had to carry him out?
They just hauled him out on the rope and
Let him
got the
go.
rope off of him and let him go.
Lassoed the potty pig.
Poo-poo pig.
He eventually got cleaned off, I reckon. I
Ew.
don't know. But oh my goodness alive.
Ooh.
Yeah, and then we lived there for 2 years, and Daddy made good crops there. And the World War II started while we were living in that house. They bombed Pearl Harbor, and he made good crops there. And Daddy was a saving man. You had to know him to know how saving he was. In fact, he was known to be stingy. So he was pretty saving. And he saved up enough of money in 2 years of farming that farm. That was a 2-horse farm, bigger farm. It took all him and Roscoe both. Roscoe had got big enough he could plow a mule then, make a hand in the field. And he made enough money that he saved up enough. He made a down payment on that farm down there where grandmother lived now, and bought it.
How big was that farm, Mama?
Did we
How
bought
many
one there?
acres, do you remember?
Which one?
The one that you said that you moved to, that one,
The one that
where he
had,
made more money,
The 2-horse.
yeah,
the 2-horse farm.
the 2 years.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know, there was, I think about, 50, 75 acres in cultivation. They was,
And Granddaddy and
Good
Uncle
many.
Roscoe plowed all of that with mules?
yeah, yeah.
Man, that's a lot of work.
Of course, he would, when he could, he would hire somebody, if he got behind or saw he really needed, to catch up something on the farm, and he could hire a day labor, he would hire a day labor to help. And that was another thing that was unbelievable. Back then, when we lived in that log house, that far back, you could hire people for 50 and 75 cents a day. I mean, a man work all day, sweating and working in the field, plowing the mule, doing anything. And if you didn't have 75 cents to give him, if you'd asked him, well, would you take a piece of meat out of my smokehouse and work? Yes, sir. We'd be glad to have a piece of meat. They would work all day long. Mama would cut them a chunk of square piece of meat, maybe that big, off of the shoulder or side of meat or something. Whatever she had in the smokehouse that she'd give them. That's
People were hungry.
how living was then. But we had fun. We had fun. We didn't know no better. We hadn't had nothing no better. And it was fun. Yeah, and then we moved down there where grandmother is, and then the World War II was going hot and heavy, and the prices rose up a lot better and everything. So it got better. And me and Janice had a lot more.
Oh, she's got a million stories, y'all. And I've been trying to record some of them as she tells them. I know y'all don't wanna sit here all night. We could easily all night, but I know y'all don't want to do that, but.
Hello.
The stories about when her and Daddy, how they met, I had never heard that story. In starting, when they first got married and how they're starting, their life together and everything, and then stories about all of us growing up, and David, there was the one about David we've all heard that one about getting run over with the trailer wheel. Traumatic.
That's what's wrong with him
And
today.
Danny getting his toe caught in the bicycle
here has
smoke.
not
There's a lot of stories.
Who in here has not heard the story about David getting run over? His head run over with a trailer.
Come on. All right, you might tell it.
Tell that one, and then we're probably gonna have to take Katie and Cole home. April.
We were in the pasture there back of the house, just
Grandmama and Granddaddy were farming at that time.
yeah, we were farming.
And they lived in Moultrie.
Danny was he was about 3 years old, I
I thought
guess.
he was older than
And
I.
David was just a toddler. He was walking good. He was probably 2 years old, about 2 at the most. He's toddling around good, but he could walk and stay on his feet good enough. He could run swift like he could dart to get on that tractor with his daddy quicker than you could catch him. Anyway, we were out there in the pasture, had been down in the woods picking up the wood. We were getting some wood for the heater. And there was a few pieces of wood on the back of the trailer, but they were not very many, not very much. But the trailer had tires on it. It didn't have metal wheels. And it was a 2-wheel trailer, weren't very big. It was probably 3 times bigger than that table though, a lot bigger.
Heavy.
It was heavy enough. And I was on the ground, me and Danny and David was on the ground, walking along out away from the trailer a little bit. Daddy was on the tractor pulling the trailer, and David was walking along there, and Daddy was just going real slow with the tractor and trailer, and we were just walking, and all of a sudden David just took off and made a dash for the back end of that tractor to get up on it with his daddy to ride it. He wanted to ride with him, and he made a dash for it, and his daddy would reach around and pick him up, you know, and put him up on the tractor with him and ride him. And that's what he was going to do, was he was running to get on that tractor with his daddy. And he run up there and he got right between the trailer body and the tractor wheel. You know, the body of the trailer, you come out like that, and the tractor wheel, and the body of that trailer knocked David down on the ground. Junior was driving, looking straight ahead. He didn't even see David coming, running toward the tractor, you know, toward him. And when I saw David tear out running to the tractor, I knew what he was going to do. And I started screaming just as loud as I could for Junior to stop, stop, stop.
Tractors are loud.
And then,
He couldn't hear
and
it.
of course it was loud, making a racket. And he didn't know what I was saying stop for. And when he looked around and he saw me saying stop, stop, he stopped like that. Well, the trailer had done knocked David down, and that tire had run over him down on the ground and had run over him. And Junior says, "What?" And I run to that trailer then. I saw David was under that wheel right there at that trailer. And I run to that trailer and I grabbed that trailer with both hands like this. And I lifted up with all my might. And I actually lifted that trailer off of David.
It was heavy.
And when I told Junior, I says, crank that tractor up and go. And he cranked it up and went. I don't know if he actually knew what had happened still. And he cranked up the tractor and pulled forwards. And we got David up off the ground, and he was breathing, but he was kind of short of breath. It had knocked the breath out of him, mashed the breath out of him.
Where exactly did the wheel run over him? Was it his shoulder?
Yeah, it come across his shoulder and across his head like that. There was a little skint place on his head and a little place on his ear and on his head right
like
there.
That. I mean, I
Not
know
so
it's
much here.
It just come across him like that. Well, we observed him ourselves, and just quick as we could, we took Danny down to Granny's and asked her to keep him while we took David to the hospital. We took him to the emergency room. And when we got in the emergency room, David had started to breathing more normal by the time we got to town with him. And when the doctor saw him, he said he examined him, listened to his heart, and he checked his everything, you know, where the signs was, and I explained to him what happened and everything, and he asked me about what sort of ground was the the wheel on, was it a rubber tire or, you know, and all? And I told him, yeah, it was a rubber tire, and the ground was, it was dirt mostly, but there was a little bit of grass on it. And he checked him, and he said, I think he'll be all right. He says he seems to be normal. Says I don't see any sign of anything that'll be a problem. And he says they just says that one thing. He says there was somebody up above was with him.
Absolutely.
He just thought nothing was wrong.
Well, he couldn't find nothing, and
Where was
they
Wayne?
never did seem to be no results from it. So I guess it was just fine.
Yeah, what Wayne, where was Wayne?
You know, I don't know. I reckon he was there.
Yeah.
Probably there with me and Danny.
Yeah.
And I left him and Danny with Granny.
That's one of my favorites.
I know it
And
is.
you
It
remember
rivals my story with the hamster.
you remember the time that Danny got his little toe caught in the bicycle wheel and like cut it off, don't you,
No, I
David?
don't remember that.
Oh, you don't remember
No,
that?
where did that
At
happen?
Forest Park.
I got my foot caught in the bicycle spoke one time.
Was it your little toe?
It
I
No,
thought
it wasn't my little
Mama
toe.
said it was Danny.
Well, yeah.
Well, he probably did too. All of them may have at one time or another.
Nobody ever wore shoes.
But none of them never got a critical injury.
Yeah.
They got skirmishes and things like that, but they never did. None of them get a real critical injury. But Danny was riding on the back of the bicycle with another boy at Forest Park, going down the road. I remember that. And he got his little toe in the bicycle spoke, and it like to have cut that little toe off. It was just hanging on with a piece of
I do
skin.
remember that. I remember
And
that.
we had to take him to the emergency room, or did, because the doctors, it was late in the evening. Doctor's offices was closed. And the doctor put that little toe back on, cleaned it and done everything, whatever he could, and sewed it back on and done it up. And he said, watch it real close. And if it goes to doing this and this, he says, then you may have to bring him back. He may lose that toe yet.
If it got
But-
infected.
If it got infected, but he said it may, we're hoping that it'll, be okay and grow back. Well,
You didn't put turpentine on it, did you?
no, I don't reckon I did. I don't remember. I think I'd quit using kerosene and turpentine by then. But it adhered back to his foot good. Didn't ever give him no trouble. And he still got his little toe today.
Mm.
So how did you and Granddaddy meet?
So I'm telling you now, I'm telling y'all right now, the Lord has been so good to this family. We've had our little problems and different things, but He has been so good to us as a family.
Amen.
None of us have, I've thought about it a lot of times. We've not had any real critical illnesses. To be as large a family as we are, and we've all been healthy, pretty much. And it's just beyond words how thankful we ought to be that He's been so good to us. I know we've lost 2 of our family members, 3. No, 4. I can't keep up with it. But that's life. That's all in life. He gives and he takes. He takes. But we all gonna be together again. I don't know how much longer I'll be here. I know I'm getting old. But that's my most fondest wish and my prayer is that all of us will see each other and be together in heaven.
We will.
So let's all remember that.
Amen to that.
And someday, if me and Janice is smart enough, we might get some words put together to these stories and make a little pamphlet out of it or something.
It'll be a novel.
I was gonna say,